Hi, my name is Kraemer. I'm a Senior Program Manager Lead for the Fast Track Engineering team, and I'm here to talk to you today about Fast Track for SQL Server 2012. So a quick overview of our agenda for today. Very quickly, I'll talk to you about what the Fast Track program is, the value proposition for you, our customers, and then we'll talk about some of the great features of SQL Server 2012 that are specific to Fast Track and the Fast Track program. So what is Fast Track? Fast Track Reference Architectures is a partner-based design program for data warehousing workloads. So specifically what that means is software, hardware system design, and configuration for all of those components for SQL Server data warehousing. This is a workload-specific reference architecture program. I mentioned data warehousing. Our current Fast Track program is specific to data warehousing and the unique nature of data warehousing workloads. In the SQL Server Fast Track world, a one-size-fits-all is not our design parameter. Rather, we give you system configurations on the latest hardware that are specific to the unique characteristics of data warehousing. So what are the benefits of the Fast Track data warehousing program? So the points here on the slide really stand on their own. But I'm actually going to highlight a few specific value props unique to Fast Track. So first of all, pre-balanced architectures. One of the most unique aspects of that is that really what we bring is the best practices, expertise, and skill of top industry engineers from both our hardware partners like HP, Dell, and IBM, but also from Microsoft Engineering. And we bring those resources into your data centers by pre-designing and validating reference architectures for specific workloads like data warehousing. So choice, I mentioned all of the hardware partners that are involved. In fact, there are several, all the major really independent hardware vendors, Dell, IBM, HP, EMC, Cisco, Hitachi Data Services, and soon more to come. This choice allows a lot of our customers to fit their architectures along with their current standards for procurement, their current preferred hardware vendors, whether that's HP server and storage or EMC storage with HP servers, for example. Risk is another important characteristic for enterprise purchases for our customers today. And one of the valuable aspects of pre-designed and pre-validated reference architectures for the data warehousing workload is risk mitigation. You're not guessing at the best approach or trying to interpret multiple technical white papers written across a variety of subjects and or workloads. Instead, we provide not only the best database configuration for the workload, but also our hardware vendor's latest hardware and the best configuration and setup of that hardware for the workload. And finally, let's talk about scale. So Fast Track data warehousing has greatly extended the scale for SQL Server data warehousing deployments. In fact, we have deployments on systems with capacities up to 80 terabytes today. And on the topic of scale and customer deployments, I want to talk about a lot of the customer case studies that we have published now for SQL Server data warehousing. And this really gets to the heart of the value of the Fast Track program. We have customers who are willing to stand up and publicly say, yes, this works for us, and talk about the value that it brought to their particular environments. So not only do we have a program that brings the best engineering minds from Microsoft and our partners, but we also have customer evidence and testimonial to support the results of those reference architectures that we create. So Fast Track for SQL Server 2012, what's the bottom line for SQL 2012? Well, the first thing that we like to point out, and really our first lab work in this area, had to do with an upgrade from SQL Server 2008 R2. In fact, this was an upgrade that we did on a lab system that is published HP 2-socket reference architecture. The target for that reference architecture capacity is 20 terabytes. And we simply upgraded it from SQL Server 2008 R2 to SQL Server 2012. We made no changes to the hardware, either in configuration or in spec. So no new hardware, simple software upgrade is the scenario here. Now, we ran our standard Fast Track benchmark for data warehousing. That benchmark is a high-stress, complex query workload using queries that are variants of queries you'll find in TPCH. And we run that at 20 session concurrency, so very stressful benchmark. So the performance slide I'm going to show you here, which really underscores the results of this upgrade scenario, is based on our new PowerView technology. And what it shows is this 20 session stress workload running over time. On our x-axis along the bottom, we have cumulative database pages processed. On the y-axis along the left side, we have the average gigabytes per second throughput while the test is running. And the plot area, this blue circle that you see, it will grow over time as I run this slide, will grow over time, showing the total number of queries processed during the test. So I'm going to go ahead and kick this off and you can watch the performance. Okay, so what we see here now is this slide is running over time. This is about a 70-minute run. And you see it just processed through there in certainly an accelerated fashion. What you see is actually a net result of about 2.5 gigabytes a second throughput sustained over the test. That's the average rate that we got, just under 2.5 gigabytes a second. That happens to be exactly what this same system with running SQL Server 2008 R2 was rated at. So the end result here is no change in performance. In a simple upgrade, no hardware changes from SQL Server 2008 R2 based reference architecture to SQL Server 2012 based reference architecture. In total, this test ran just under 200 queries. All right, so the second scenario now actually features a new technology in SQL Server 2012 called column store index. This column store technology is one of the biggest impact features of the SQL Server 2012 release, and certainly for the data warehousing workload has tremendous potential. So this is the exact same test that we just ran, the queries, the schema, running 20 session concurrency. There's no differences. Again, we're still running on a system that was designed for SQL Server 2008 R2. Now, I will say that if we had designed this system for SQL Server 2012, there would be a few differences. One major difference would be the system would have quite a bit more RAM. So we're a little bit limited in the performance gain that we're going to see here, but I think you're still going to be pretty excited about the results that you see. So same basic scenario. Now we've added column store indexing to our schema. And you can find out exactly how we did that and what our best practices are for adding column store index schema in our fast track reference guide for SQL Server 2012 that will be published along with the release of general release of SQL Server 2012. All right, so same setup again here on the chart. On the x-axis, we have cumulative pages read. On the y-axis, we have average gigabytes per second throughput. The blue plot area circle here is SQL Server 2012 base with no column store index. The red is SQL Server 2012 with column store indexing applied. And I'm going to go ahead and kick this off, and you'll be able to watch both tests run, same test, same amount of time, and see the difference in performance. All right, so now we have both tests running. And one thing you'll notice in the first about third of this test is that the two plot area circles stay fairly close together. And the reason for this actually is that early on in this test, the mix of queries that are running in the red dot, or the column store index version, actually has quite a few queries that are not using the column store index plan. Because it's implemented as an index, it's an optimizer decision whether to use column store or not use column store. When we run our workloads, we're running a workload that has a mix of both queries that use column store and don't use column store. In other words, a real-world test. Again, this is a workload test, not an individual query. If we ran individual query tests, you would see results sometimes as much as 20 times faster. But here we're running a mixed workload. We're running queries that run through our traditional row plan, queries that run through the column store plan under 20 session, heavy concurrency. These are very CPU complex queries. Now the result that you saw here is actually pretty dramatic in the end. The average throughput for the non-CSI plan, as we saw in our previous test, was about 2.5 gigabytes a second. Well, the average throughput for the column store enhanced test is 5 gigabytes a second. Now that's doubling effectively the average throughput, or doubling the number of queries run. We run almost 600 queries in the column store index enhanced plan versus just about 200 queries in the non-column store plan. The significant difference is pretty impressive given that we've made no hardware changes on the system. We simply upgraded the software and applied a very simple column store indexing scheme. So real value to the bottom line here, even on your existing hardware. A very exciting upgrade opportunity for customers with data warehousing, analytical type workloads, or BI type workloads. All right, so in summary, Fast Track for SQL Server 2012. So obviously the big highlight, double the throughput for our workload rated benchmarks. We note that all of the customer testimonial that I showed you before and all those case studies can be found publicly from Microsoft. All of that testimonial really correlates to our workload benchmarks. Those benchmarks were used to design the systems that those customers had success with in their data warehousing environments. Those are the same tests that we're using now to benchmark SQL 2012 column store index performance. Also, we now support solid state storage, and we're hopeful to see our partners begin to build systems, reference architectures based on solid state technology. We think this is a tremendous new technology for data warehousing workloads. We're excited to see that capability. And finally, overall, we have a lot of best practice guidance that will be available with the general availability of SQL Server 2012 for column store index implementation in your current data warehousing environment. So our call to action here in summary, contact your preferred hardware partner. And you saw the list of hardware partners earlier in the slides. Contact your preferred vendor about their plans for reference architectures for SQL Server 2012. They'll be able to give you insights into what systems they plan to validate or qualify for SQL Server 2012 Fast Track reference architectures. Consider upgrading to SQL Server 2012. Your analytical workload, your data warehousing workload, your BI environment, even on your existing hardware, a simple upgrade and leveraging column store index has a huge potential for performance gains. So finally, don't forget to visit the Microsoft Virtual Academy. We have several other sessions that will be of interest. In particular, there's a session specific to column store index. You can find out more about the technology. Download SQL Server 2012 trial software. You can get that from our SQL Server portal, on Microsoft.com, and participate in the virtual launch activities. And you can actually collect points for prizes. So thank you very much. I'm happy for the opportunity to share with you some of the exciting new things about SQL Server Fast Track and for SQL Server 2012.